So I don't see Mikhail on the call. So we'll but maybe we can cover that ourselves. For it's ROS 2. We're looking for level 2 compliance with Rep 2004. Has everybody visited that GitHub link? Our quality level? I believe we meet all of this. Thanks, Jeremy. I can't see why we wouldn't want to go for level 2 compliance with that. Anybody not in agreement?
Are we missing some bullet point 3s? Section?
Yeah, no, we're missing several here. Documentation is one of them. Testing is one of them. And I also don't know if we've actually done a dependency trace either. But I do think it's something that we need to move toward. I want to talk about documentation though. Like, what does that actually look like for us? Does that look like a bunch of markdown files in the SROS2 repo, or actual documentation in the ROS2 index? Like what?
Yeah, I'm always pretty confused about where the location of ROS2 specific
I know.
The story is pretty unclear.
I agree. We need some clarification there. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, at the moment, I think some pretty self-explanatory tutorials will do it.
Where, though?
Well, maybe directly on the repository with the wiki pages. And then we can see what's the official place for tutorials and documentation in ROS2.
The official place is the index, but right now the ROS2 docs index page is sort of distro agnostic, or it's just the latest LPF.
I understand that it would change.
There's not much like ROS2 package specific docs. Like they're either the tutorials or examples, but like maybe aside from the ROS2 bridge or specific tutorials, there's no documentation specific for any ROS2 package. So it's always like, where do we decide to host them? Close to the source code or close to where everything else ROS2 is hosted? And then I think Kyle brought up earlier on the discourse thread, and like, how are we going to version all of this?
Yeah, that is particularly brutal. I kind of like a read the docs type of thing. Do any packages do that?
I think the navigation 2. So we could look at how the navigation 2 has been doing that. I kind of like the idea of like hosting the docs close to the source, because then like, someone comes back and say, how did dashing work? We can just point them at the dashing branch.
Yeah, that's true. I was under the impression that read the docs was generated from the repo. Is that not the case?
That was how Navigation 2 was doing it for a while. And then I think they either outsourced their docs to a different branch or a separate like .io repo and that to host the doc site.
Yeah, they have a separate repo for the documentation.
Ruffin, do you have? I don't think the documentation for SROS2 would be anything near the documentation for navigation. But given that they have another repo for the documentation, I assume they can still do branches and actually match up the branches. Would that would that satisfy your desire to be able to point people to previous versions of documentation, or do you actually have a preference for having the documentation in the same repo?
Our documentation footprint is probably pretty small. We don't need like fancy figures and GIFs and whatnot. So, I think keeping the docs close. I think one thing maybe we could do is like be a little more succinct. Do we need like 3 pages of Windows, Mac, and Linux? Maybe we could kind of unify it and makes it a little easier to maintain or add stuff to.
Yeah, I think we can probably maintain those in the repo. But it's still a question of where the exported docs live. I mean, Jeremy, I think you're right. I think we can have some nice SROS2 tutorials on the ROS index, but then any sort of API documentation, that type of thing, we need to decide where that type of thing lives. And I don't think there's clear guidance for that yet. Should we start a Discord thread about this and actually ask for advice? I mean, we're not going to be the only ones with these questions.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to ask, where does a ROS2 specific package live, not just like general ROS2 tutorials.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that action.
And hopefully we're soliciting as much help from the community for these tutorials as well. I mean, just thinking about what sort of sparked this, the SROS2 level 2 compliance, right? That's going to be a significant amount of work. So we'll have to get, I think no one person can probably do all of that mitigation. So maybe for our next meeting, we can break what that work is down to chunks and see if we can get volunteers to start contributing to that.
Yeah, we need to take another pass through what we have in this issue and turn it into clear action items. I agree.
Okay, so for the next call, we'll have some action items. Then we can get people to volunteer for those. Okay. Sid, let's talk about CPEs for all ROS active releases.
Yes, I just wanted to mention we've requested and received CPEs for the ROS releases, and you may wonder what the heck that means. So CPEs are Common Platform Enumeration, is what it stands for. Essentially, it's a unique identifier for ROS that you can file CVEs against, and also the whole security content automation. That becomes a primary key for ROS software. So eventually you could do something like, how would you discover whether or not ROS is installed? How would you discover which version of ROS is installed? Things like that all tie back to CPEs. We did it, I filed for the CPEs just because we need one to tie the CIS security benchmarks to, and also because I wanted to tie our, as we report CVEs, to be able to tie CVEs to specific identifiers, and that way you can query them back and forth. So those are out there. They're documented in the Vol reports handling thing, and we'll start using them. I think the only one that probably would use them more than anyone else is Alias, because I think they have reported some CVEs. So if they tie them back to the CPEs, that'll make them more easily discovered. So any questions on CPEs?
Do you have a link to where that's documented? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's actually under the handling Vol reports right now, under the next item. So I just put them in there. That document ended up being longer than I thought. But down in the section on the ROS CVE tracker, and that's intended, how we track things. So those are the numbers there. If you see, I filed them as the vendor is Open Robotics, and the software is Robot Operating System. I described it to NIST. That's what they chose. And then for version, I chose version 1 and version 2, and then the named versions as the distributions. that's kind of how that shook out. That way, you can file a vulnerability for all of ROS, for all of ROS 2, or for ROS Foxy.
Fine.
Any other questions on that?
No, did we want to go into the VDP related suggestions?
Yeah, so I'll just mention these as I was going through, and when I had the discussions with Open Robotics about the VDP, we went back through some of our old notes, and we had lots of ideas on things that we could do. So now is going through them. I wonder if there are things that we actually want to do. The first one was to create the internal to ROS process for what we do when we receive the bill report, and that's the linked Word doc. And for that, rather than discuss that here, I think it would take a lot of time to discuss it here. I just ask if you can just read through that, see if that makes sense as to ways that the community will handle CVEs when they're reported to us. So that's a draft document out there for your comment. Think of it as a whiteboard. I think you should have rights to actually go ahead and change and update and rewrite, not just make comments. But feel free to use that. So that was kind of the first take out of the VDP discussions. The next one I think that we talked a lot about was building a catalog of security use cases. Do we want to go anywhere with that right now?
Can you describe that a little better, Sid? What do you think of when you think of security use cases?
To be honest, Joe, I'm not quite sure. I was taking notes as we went along. This came up in 2 different meetings. I think one of them might have been related to testing. I'm not quite sure. Does anybody else remember?
I mean, I'm kind of guessing here. Go ahead, Victor.
Sorry, Joe. So I think it was myself in one of the past meetings who kind of like suggested this. My intention was that it would be very helpful to at least have a series of use cases considering real robots and how security essentially is being implemented on them, adding value, so that we can somehow reason about different processes. So my idea originally was to select a number of different use cases, robot interacting and doing task A and task B in different environments, to essentially try to grow our security discussion towards essentially mitigations once we start getting actual reports.
I think,
so essentially,
you're suggesting like a case study seems to make sense. If we can get some examples of that, that'd be good. I mean, I was kind of, I read that as security use cases of, do we think of sort of, I'll say, suggested security controls for robots of a certain risk category, high, medium, low, etc. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It does make sense to get some case studies out there.
So I guess the rationale is so ROS is essentially a framework, right? And to many out there, it might be difficult to see the impact of a vulnerability on one of the ROS components. So having kind of like well-defined use cases with actual results might actually help very much picture the value of why people should be using ROS2 against not using it at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if I were to prioritize it, I would like more help from folks in this working group on the first item for today, the SROS2 level compliance work. And then we could go into that. But yeah, I think obviously it would help people to have some case studies to look at. And then I read the link you pointed to for VDPs for robotics. And this strikes a chord with me for, have you looked at the SSVC from CERT? It's sort of a more, I'll say, use case based I'll say system owner based approach to security as opposed to the security, say a group like MITRE assigning a severity. So you have the user or the operator having input on how you respond to security vulnerabilities. But it might be worth reading that, or if folks have a chance after this call to read both of these links, we can talk about it again later. But yeah, definitely applying the risk framework that is unique to robotics, things that are moving around, things that can have an effect in the physical world, I think should be something we do with all of our vulnerabilities. I mean, we could probably learn some things from other folks in cyber physical, like SCADA and industrial IoT as well. This isn't something we should have to come up with entirely on our own.
Right. Thank you for that. I'll go through that. So my main objective by bringing this into is because we've been internally doing lots of thinking about essentially where do we stand within the supply chain, and also one question that was raised internally is where does the ROS2 security working group stand in terms of are we the defenders, are we researchers? If we are getting reports, probably not. How are we going to essentially interact with upstream vendors, downstream vendors? So it does feel like the supply chain with ROS is going to be very, very difficult. So essentially, these are some thoughts. But I do really think we should probably consider this for iterations on the VDP. So I just wanted to ask for input on how does the rest of the group see this thing. The link that you just shared, Joe, is a great pointer. So I'll go through that. Any further input is going to be very helpful.
Cool. Those are our defined agenda topics for today.
So just quick question, Joe. Did we get any takeaways? Is there anything that we're going to work on for right now, or is it just something we want to leave these things in the queue? The use cases, the templates.
Did we skip the template? Or am I? Did I?
Oh, we skipped that template.
Did I fall asleep for 30 seconds?
Let's talk about the template. Sorry, I thought we touched on that. Sid, you put that one in there. Do you care to?
Yeah, that was just as we were going along. We were debating on what do we do for, what do we do? And this is similar, I think, to Victor's comments. What do we do when somebody reports a vol and it's not a ROS vol, it's a robot vol or a vendor-specific vol, and then that evolved into, hey, maybe we should do help robotics firms create their own vol disclosure policy, given that a lot of the firms are new to the space. So the thought was, I think, that we were going to create some sort of templates that, a Boston Nova, maybe they're large, but someone like that can just simply apply as how to get vols in their specific implementations reported.
I'm just curious. That makes a lot of sense. Should we focus on a template, or should our ultimate goal be to create a form that would let them follow along instead of a template? Well, what's everybody's thoughts?
I think we had the discussion quite a while ago, didn't we? I remember someone from this group saying that templates didn't really work. I don't really know. We ourselves provide within the robot vulnerability database kind of like a template, but then people use it or they don't. Just reports come at just very different forms. So yeah, a template though, I mean, something that helps people and incentivizes people to report, I think that's a good idea.
No, Victor, this is a template for a VDP, not a template for a disclosure.
I think on the receiving end, so when you report a vol into a firm, that they actually have a procedure to how to handle it internally.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, guys, I misunderstood. So then this is kind of like a recipe for how to follow up, or what's going to be the interaction like?
Yeah, and actually how they would handle and release updates, how they would take in vol reports and then fix them and commit to the community and then get them back out. So essentially, to teach others how to go through the process we just went through with our VDP.
What does that look like exactly? I mean, okay, so someone comes to us and says, "Hey, I have this vulnerability that isn't in scope for the ROS2 VDP, but I'd like to get it to whatever vendor is involved." What do we anticipate doing? Contacting the vendor and saying, "Hey, we can't find a VDP for you. You should use this one." I mean,
Yeah, I think there
we'll
is
have a lot of. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gil.
Yeah, sorry, I just jumped in. Mikhail, I joined the call a bit late, but I'm here.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, my feeling is that maybe we could just like, if we provide along our VDP, kind of like the thought process, like just give some guidelines of like, just that's how we came up with ours. And then people can use that as a reference to guide how they want to do theirs. But I'm not sure we could like give different feedback to different vendors. I mean, I don't know how much like more than some people would know about that to be able to say for your specific case you should more do this, do more that. But if you can document what we did for ourselves, maybe it can guide people and say, oh, this is relevant to us, this is less relevant.
I do like.
Sorry,
go ahead, Roger. No, go ahead, Roger.
Would it maybe be worth, just because I mean, if we've literally just gone through the process of developing this one ourselves, wouldn't it make most sense to say, okay, this one is the template, and maybe we can just go through and annotate. If you're trying to do your own, these maybe are particular areas where you might choose to do something different, and this is the reason why we chose to go this way for ours.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think if we offer it up like we've done this, we understand there's a lot of robotics companies who are now taking security seriously, and this is a framework you can use for creating your own, and we can put it up on our wiki. I think that'll add a lot of value. Plus, we can all be speaking the same language when we're coordinating, because I think what we'll see, honestly, are a lot of the vulnerabilities not really that are going to be catchy won't be from the ROS packages themselves, but actually from the applications people have built on top of it, like your first-time configuration client and like that sits around that. We're going to see the vulnerabilities and things like that. So by having all the same terminology defined and templates, we can be more efficient. So yeah, I think we can post that on the wiki somewhere.
Maybe a simple FAQ would do it,
Yeah.
Explaining what we've done for our VDP and answering a couple common questions in a single file, single page. That's it.
Yes, that would be helpful. We can kind of combine the page into one. Here's a couple example documents. Here's an FAQ, all into one area of the wiki. Yeah, I think we should do that. I guess I'll say maybe Sid, since you've done a lot of the work on the VDP for ROS, maybe you can start working on that. It just seems right to have it sit in your area to just kick it off, and we can review it next meeting.
Yeah, I can start to sketch something up, and I think we'll target it probably for going somewhere near our community page in GitHub.
Cool. It works. Okay.
So I know we're almost over. I just wanted to. I read the notes of like what happened on the ROS2 level 2 compliance. One quick note I had that I wanted to check with you. When I came up with the list, but it would really benefit from a double check, mostly because I made some assumptions in there. And so just make sure that we think they're valid. And also cross-reference, basically like right now the information in ROS2 is kind of disseminated in two places. There is a rep that says, hey, this is the things you should do to like claim the quality level. And then there is a developer guide that says, in the case of ROS2 core, the metric we apply to that specific criteria is this one. And so right now what I did is that I made a list based on the rep, but I haven't cross-referenced it with the developer guide yet. And so that's something we may need to do if we want to claim level 2 as a ROS core package. And so any help is very welcome in both of these areas, the missing bits and the cross-referencing.
So the list that you're talking about is the one that's in the issue right now, or are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I made a list that I copied from the rep basically in the issue, and then I tick boxes and put rationales next to why I considered we could tick them. And then I made just a table below to have a like an easier to read version of it. But I didn't cross-reference that with like the ROS2 core. They say, oh, they want to have at least 95% coverage, which is something we don't. But I still tick the box coverage because we do have coverage testing. We just don't match the ROS2
and we actually
core.
get numbers out, unlike a lot of the core packages.
Yeah, that's a different. So just I didn't want to take much time, but I just wanted to like say what I did and what is still left, which may not be obvious from the issue. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We are in a bit of a unique situation where we're maintaining a core package. So getting to quality level 2 does entail two different things, both checking quality level 2 as well as actually adhering to the core standards for quality level 2, which it's interesting.
And I just wanted to confirm when we're saying we hope to claim that like in the near future, like for Foxy, even if Foxy is already out, the level 2 target is like near future. Is that right?
I would say so. I mean, it feels like it's within reasonable reach. Would you agree?
Well, there is one bit that is biting us, is the fact that all our dependencies need to be level 2 or lower.
Well, that's I haven't traced the dependencies yet, and it didn't look like you quite had either, did you?
Well, basically, ROS2 has only 2 dependencies, which is RCLPy and ROS2 CLI. But none of the ROS2 CLI have quality declaration so far. So because they don't have one, we can't really have one.
Yeah.
At least we can aim only for level 4, I think.
And we don't know what their plans are there, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, I'll take. I was going to make a forum post about where API docs live. I'll also make a forum post asking about that, because if that's not going to happen, then we might as well punt this because we won't get there.
I mean, then we can justify. We can say like, okay, I mean, we can say we claim this level because we have everything, and the only one we can't prove is because our dependencies can prove it. But like we can still like justify it. I mean, maybe it's not a very valid level 2, but we can still like make the work to get everything else in place.
That's a pretty core dependency.
Yeah, for sure. But what I mean is like it doesn't have to impact too much the rest of the work. I think like adding documentation is still a valuable thing, and
Certainly.
the fact that we don't have one like is a shame. But the fact that we have another incentive to add one, which is just claim numbers, I mean, it's better than no incentive. So we should take advantage of that to do it.
All right, I'll ask you about that.
Okay, that was it on my side. I just wanted to catch up. Thanks.
Well, on that note, I think we're out of time for today. Thank you all for joining the call, and have a great week.
Thanks. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for organizing.
Everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, guys. Thank you.